Thank you for joining me. My name is Ken Raggio, and this is today's Bible study. In our last lesson, we spoke of Jacob returning from the land of Haran and his uncle Laban, his passing by Esau and reconciling with Esau. And now he's entering back into the promised land area and is settling at Shechem. God had promised this town of Shechem to Abraham and his descendants. And years later, Jacob has returned, and he bought land there for his family. Shechem became a highly significant city throughout the Bible days. We see it mentioned over 64 times in the Old Testament. And we know some very notable things there. Joseph is buried there to this day. Joseph had visited his brothers in Shechem before he was sold into slavery. He was later buried there. And many important Bible stories are told in that area. But in modern times, Palestinians now control it. It is called Nablus. It is a Palestinian Islamic territory largely occupied by terrorists. But Jesus is going to reclaim Shechem soon when he comes back because it is one of the cities of the Promised Land. Genesis 33:19, speaking of Jacob, it said he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. So Nablus today is in the hands of the Palestinians, but it was one time owned by Jacob. By the way, his name is Israel. So we see in this 33rd chapter, the Bible said he erected there an altar, verse 20, and he called it Elo Israel, which means God, the God of Israel. And this ordeal with Laban and Esau had just passed, and so Jacob was ready to take his family and flocks into the Promised Land. He had stopped for a while at Succoth, which is east of Jordan River, and he built shelters for his cattle. But before long, he purchased this land from Shechem, and for the first time, he was a property owner. He owned a part of the Promised Land. Shechem today is nestled between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. That's the Mount of Blessing and the Mount of Cursing, where Joshua brought the children of Israel when they crossed Jordan. Sooner or later, God's promises are all going to come to pass, and so Jacob saw the fulfillment of that prophecy. But things didn't go very well at that time because Jacob's daughter Dinah was involved with the king of Shechem's son, and before the story was finished, the king's son had raped Dinah, and it enraged the sons of Jacob, specifically Simeon, and they went into a rage. Jacob's sons mindlessly murdered and plundered the entire city of Shechem. They overreacted to the tragedy, and it became a horrible loss, a horrible setback for Jacob. He said in chapter 34 of Genesis, verse 30, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed in my house." So this whole new settling in the city of Shechem was going sour because his sons went into a rage. We're going to see that they didn't have all their act together spiritually. And so in chapter 35, verses 2 through 5, Jacob said to his household, "Put away all the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments." And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And the terror of God was on the cities that were round about them. You see, back in Haran, they had picked up some bad religion from Uncle Laban, and they had carried it to this point, and Jacob said, "It's time to clean house." And that's the truth with every one of us. Sometime along the way, we have to reflect on all of our bad ways, our errors, our mistakes, our wrong believings, our wrongdoings, and we have to clean up our act. So Jacob, in verse 14, set up a pillar in the place where the Lord had talked with him, a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. You remember how that Jacob had met the angel of the Lord earlier. After being displaced from Shechem, Jacob returned to the house of God. That's Bethel, house of God. He built an altar there, and he made an offering to the Lord. And it wasn't long after that, his precious beloved wife Rachel died, giving birth to her baby Benjamin. And soon after that, Jacob's father Isaac died. And we need to look at this and consider that no matter how things are going on one hand, sometimes our inevitable tragedies are much easier to bear if we've already been to an altar beforehand, and that was the case. Jacob had gone back to the Lord and made an altar there in Bethel where he had met him earlier. Sometimes we need to go build an altar in places where we have forsaken. In Genesis 35:11 and 12, God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. So God's covenant here passed from Abraham to Isaac and then to Jacob and all of his seed. There are so many accounts in the book of Genesis that reiterate this fact. So we realize this has to be one of the oldest real estate deeds on planet Earth, God giving this promised land to the children of Israel. We talk about Leah and Rachel, Jacob's wives. A lot of people don't understand how he got by having 2 wives and 2 concubines, but marriage laws, of course, did not exist prior to Moses' trip to Mount Sinai. This is before Moses' giving of the law. And so polygamy was something we saw very often in antiquity. Jacob had married, he wanted Rachel, as you remember, but his uncle gave him Leah instead. And so he ended up being married to Leah and Rachel. Rachel was initially barren, so she gave her handmaiden Bilhah to Jacob as a surrogate wife. And then later, as Leah aged, she left off bearing, and so she gave Zilpah, her handmaiden, to Jacob. So the 4 wives altogether bore 12 sons to Jacob, which we now know as the 12 tribes of Israel. And the genealogy of it is in Genesis 35:23-26. They were the sons of Leah, Reuben and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Then there were the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Gad and Asher. Now let me jump back to Esau for a moment and tell you about Esau, because you know Jacob and Esau ended up going separate ways. In chapter 36, Genesis verse 9, these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir. God knew in advance that Esau was not going to work out, because in the beginning he married an ungodly wife. Esau went to a strange nation to find her. He settled east of Jordan in the region of Mount Seir. His descendants became known as the Edomites. When Moses brought the children of Israel from Egypt many years later, the Edomites would not allow Moses and the children of Israel to pass through that land. These were Esau's great-grandchildren, the Amalekites. They were the first to declare war on the children of Israel. There was always bad blood between Esau and his descendants and Jacob and his descendants. Many of Esau's descendants were merciless enemies of Israel. One thing you need to remember, that is, when you hear the word Edom, that's Esau's people. The Edomites are Esau, or Esau is Edom. Now we're back to Joseph. In 37:5, Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. You know that Jacob's favorite son was Rachel's firstborn, Joseph. His brothers were jealous and hostile toward him because he had his father's favor. At 17 years old, Joseph dreamed 2 dreams that would eventually catapult him into world recognition for all of time. Think about this. A divinely ordered, profoundly significant destiny was inaugurated in a 17-year-old boy. It all began with his father's love. Learn a lesson from this. We should take extreme care to pronounce blessings on our children, blessings on those we love. But the Bible said Joseph dreamed the dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. So he already was out of favor because he was his father's favorite. But when he told this dream, it only made them madder. In Genesis 37:3, Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. But you know, men often resent others who receive special favors. His brothers hated Joseph because he had his daddy's favor. Korah had hated Moses. Saul hated David because of God's favor. God's favor on a man often provokes the jealousy or hatred of others. People commit grievous acts against people who have divine favor. Lucifer killed Jesus Christ in jealousy. That's why real saints of God often have to suffer. Jesus said, hated for my name's sake. So sometimes that coat of many colors turns out to be a curse in some ways. In Genesis 37:6, Joseph said to his brother, "Hear, I pray you, this dream which I've dreamed." I want to look at that phrase, I pray you. You know, the ancient people often used that phrase, I pray you, or I pray thee, to solicit the kind consideration of their request from others. It was as if they were either afraid of the other person's opinion or what they would do. In effect, they were begging for merciful consideration. Unfortunately, making a prayerful request of ordinary men does not always elicit a favorable response. Joseph was surely hoping that his family would rejoice with him over his dream, but they didn't. So you need to make your prayers to God. If you want help, don't look to people, look to God. There was deception in this deal because the brethren, they hated him, they wanted to kill him. In Genesis 37:31, they took Joseph's coat. They killed a kid of the goats and they dipped the coat in blood. You know what had happened. They had tried to sell him into slavery. Judah tried to talk him out of it. They ended up throwing him in a pit and leaving him in a pit. And if Reuben had not argued in Joseph's defense, his brethren would have killed him. They would have killed Joseph in rabid jealousy. But instead, they held him captive in a dry well and then sold him into slavery. To cover their sins, they deceived Jacob with this bloody coat. They made their father believe that his son had been killed by a wild animal. I want to tell you, if you stand for God, your enemies are likely to use outrageous, diabolical tactics to destroy you. They may deceive others, but they'll never fool God. God is going to judge them righteously in the end. In Genesis 37, verse 26 and 7, Judah said to his brethren, "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him." So Judah was the one that talked them out of killing him. Judah, this fourth son of Jacob, opposed his brother's scheme to kill Joseph. He suggested that they should sell him as a slave. And throughout history, Jewish rabbis have argued that Judah should have saved Joseph from his brothers and returned him to his father, Jacob. But instead, Judah is blamed for his brother Joseph's plight. Many think the death of Judah's wife in the coming stories and the two sons was a divine retribution for Judah's misbehavior. And that's our lessons for today. Tomorrow we'll begin in chapter 38. Thank you for joining me. May God bless you and save your eternal soul in Jesus' name. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please like and share and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, MeWe, Gab, CloudHub, BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, Telegram, Truth Social, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Visit my website at KenRaggio.com for thousands of pages of Bible articles on every subject. Subscribe to receive my daily Bible studies by email. Go to Amazon, search for books by Ken Raggio. You'll see my daily Bible companion, 5,000 lessons almost from every chapter of the Bible, 2-volume set, Old and New Testaments. Get the Daniel prophecies, God's plan for the last days, 726 pages with footnotes, 175 photos, one of the most powerful prophecy teachings anywhere. Get the greatest doctrines of the Bible. Get praying on purpose, praying for results, how men prevail with God. Get Long Winding Road, my very personal story, and Treasures of Darkness, how to see the glory of God in your darkest trials. Click the link below if you want all 9 books for only $125 here in the United States only. And please donate through the link below and then share these videos with your friends. And I'll see you next time. Good night.